It was the line in that song, you say I'm just a dreamer, like that's such a bad thing. And it's an interesting phenomenon that we all grow up, or we're born and endowed with this dreaminess. And I don't mean like dreamy spacey. I mean like anything is possible. And then somehow it just, I think we kind of, in the process of civilizing ourselves, we a little bit over-civilize. And it becomes very uncivil. I guess it really struck me, that line this time, because you've got this whole group of kids from Parkland, Florida, right? And they're in high school. And they've just gone through this terrible tragedy. And they are crystal clear that this is not the way it's supposed to be. And you know how it is to be a teenager. You're irascible. You know you're right. You're unfettered by the system, by how things work. They're dreamers. And something magical is happening because they haven't forgotten. But that's not what I'm talking about. All I had to say. So we're in week 3 of our March theme of Rooted in the Divine. In general, what Rooted in the Divine means is that we live life from the invisible to the visible. And this week's topic is called, wait for it, Thy Will Be Done. Oh. Don't judge. Hold up. So let's it's always helpful to get clear on what we're talking about. And so I want to define will for you. According to Merriam-Webster, will is volition. Volition is the power of choosing or determining. Right? So when you think about that, this is kind of a statement of the patently obvious, but if you think about a child, they don't really have a developed will. They, kind of lay around, look at everything. And then for those of you that are parents, you know that little budding will shows up somewhere around 9 months or so. And it gets progressively more assured until there's nothing but that will. At least that's what's happening with my daughter. I hope we're not the only ones. So I want to talk about this idea of will today, because most of us grew up in Judeo-Christian culture, and if you were raised, for the most part, in a religious household in America, typically you were raised in a Judeo-Christian one. And the primary message of the Western understanding of Christianity is there is a God and you aren't it. Right? So there is a God out there and you're here, and never the twain shall meet. And so there's God's will, and then there's your will. And if you want something, or you're willing to work for something, or you choose or determine something for yourself, and it doesn't happen, you are usually told, I was usually told, it must not be God's will. This is not an answer I enjoy. This is not only is it not an answer that not only is it an answer that I don't enjoy, it's an answer that never made sense to me, right? Because the things that I was told about the divine when I was a child, it's not that was not any kind of energy or being that I wanted to be in contact with. So, have you ever been told something in your life was not God's will? Right. We have our own version of that in our sort of evolved New Thought spirituality. Have you ever said or heard, it wasn't supposed to be? It's a weird thing, because theologically, the way that we look at the world, that doesn't actually make any sense. And I'll kind of get more into that in a minute. And yet, there are times in my own life when I'm in clear recognition that something is or is not supposed to be. Because the question is, who's doing the supposing, right? If it's true that God is a power and a presence, or spirit is a power and a presence that is in, as, and through all of life, so it indwells us and it indwells everything, and the entire universe came into being as it expressed itself, this divine energy. You know what? I just completely lost track of what I was talking about. Everybody's like, can you just jump to the end? That's what I want to know. Get to the punchline. Thanks. Just another moment brought to you by menopause. Megan, what was I talking about?
Who's doing the supposing?
Right. Who's doing the supposing? Right? So if there's just this one divine energy, and it is for us, as we're going to talk about, then why would it have any kind of supposing for me, and why would it suppose something different than what I choose? So that's what we're going to kind of take apart. When I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous some 20 years ago, they said there was a prayer they gave me to say, and it was, "Thy will, not mine, be done." And so I want to look at this idea of what is my will? What does that mean to have a human will, other than to make choices and make decisions? And the way that I think about it, y'all, is that we kind of have two levels of will. So the first level of will, let's call it the conditioned will. That means that we come into the world and we go through life, and we develop beliefs that may or may not serve us. We develop places that are in need of healing that often drive us that we don't know about. We have like unconscious reactions or subconscious reactions, and we will things from this conditioned place. When we do that, we're not actually deciding, or we're not actually at choice or free or using volition. We're actually, everything that's ever happened to us, every pattern, every false idea, every area that's been wounded, every bad relationship, all of those things are coming into the present moment. And instead of being free to choose in the present, our will is actually driven by the old stuff. The stuff that we didn't choose, the stuff that may or may not serve us. Ernest Holmes says, this is from Living the Science of Mind, "Through every subtlety, by every illusion, by the logic of human experience, we are led from reality into our dream of separation." So, and he's using reality with a large R. So what he's saying there is that we are born in unity. We are born at one with the divine. And through a process that he calls, he's sort of saying it's normal. We separate. Our consciousness loses the connection that we maybe came here with. And so my thought on this is that when we are using our will in a way, Alcoholics Anonymous calls it self-will run riot. You like that, Marcia? Self-will run riot. Self-will run Wyatt. If you're Bugs Bunny. We're choosing, or we think we're choosing, and it's from a place of separation. It's from the idea that we actually have to get to something. How can I explain this? So if, let's say there's a place inside me. There is a place inside me. When I grew up, my dad, bless his heart, he was a good man, and he really valued reason and logic and a very cognitive approach to things. Now, I was kind of the child, the adult that you see if you just strip off about 45 years, that's me as a kid. I was like, blah, 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 blah. I got an idea about that, and I'm talking, and I'm moving, and I'm thinking, and my mom used to say I was philosophilia. So I had an idea about everything, right? And that was me in my sort of unfettered, raw state. So I'd tell my stories to my dad. I'd tell him my ideas about the way the world works. And he would say to me two things. Where's your evidence? And if he was having a real bad day or his neck really hurt, which it often did, he would say, boy, I wish I was half as smart as you think you are. It's quippy, but it's painful, right? And so a great deal of my adult life, I attempted to get smarter and smarter and know more and more about everything. Not because I wanted to. Now, I do it now because I want to. But because I was trying to prove that what I deeply believed was broken wasn't broken. See, because I thought it was dumb. You see? And so that's will at one level, at the conditioned level. I'm going to make choices. I'm going to do these things because it's going to make up for something that feels broken. Or it might be that my conditioned will has a personal agenda. I want this thing, and I'm going to figure out how to get this thing by every trick of the will that I know. Right? So that's one level of will. And then there is, I think, the way that I think about this anyway, there's another level that is, let's call it the authentic will. So there is something before this conditioned self that I'm in touch with, that we all have inside of us. And it has an agenda, and its agenda is to discover, to borrow Mary Morrissey's words, to discover and deliver the authentic self. Right? So there's something that only I can do, or only Candace or Tim can do. And to the degree that they surrender to that indwelling knowingness, they can then move into the world with that. We can move into the world with that. And that is this deeper will. This deeper, it's so hard for me to talk about this because I've grappled with the idea, and I'm such a kinesthetic person that when I'm talking about it, I'm trying to get you all to see what it feels like inside of me when I'm in self-will, which is like a battering ram, and when I'm in authentic will, which is like riding the horse in the direction that it's going, or getting into a river and going downstream. You see? Like I can still steer. Like I put the paddle over here and turn myself this way and turn myself this way. But I'm just steering because there's already movement in a direction. So that's what authentic will feels like to me. So now let's go back to God's will. Let's see what Ernest Holmes, the founder of our philosophy, says about God's will. The will of God is always toward that which expresses life and happiness. To suppose that the will of God could be in opposition to the advancement of our lives would be to think of spirit as being self-destructive. That's an amazing statement. To suppose that the will of God could be in opposition to the advancement of our lives would be to think of spirit as being self-destructive. But he goes on to say this. He goes on to say that if our desires are destructive, we shall suffer from them until the lesson is learned. And what is this lesson? It is simply that the universe is one and never two. It refuses to operate against itself. It is foolproof. Now, there's a lot to unpack in that. But overall, what we are being asked to do here is discard the old idea that there is some power somewhere else who's made a plan for our lives or a pattern for our lives or has ideas about our lives, and we're down here in the dark trying to guess what that is. Right? He's telling us, Ernest Holmes is telling us right out, the will of God is always toward that which expresses life and happiness. In other words, the will of God is, just add another O. The will of God is good. This is hard. This is one of those things that is, the concept is easy. So the theology of this is easy. God is not a being that's judging us. God is a loving presence that is both bigger than us and within us. And as such, it's supporting us. You know, it is an energy, a principle that's supporting us. That's pretty simple to explain. It's putting socks and shoes on this where the challenge comes in for me. Because you guys know me, I will fight. I'm going to fight. I'm going to make this happen. I can make it happen. I can make this relationship work. I can make this child behave. Yeah. But when I get in that place, it's because I'm sensing separation and I'm trying to make up for something, right? Instead of riding the horse in the direction that it's going. What I think we can do, the idea that I want to introduce, I guess, is that we can have what I would call an aligned will. Right? So that if the will of God is good, is for more life, more happiness, more wholeness, more purpose, more prosperity, our work is to align ourselves with that, to progressively discard our lower will, that conditioned will that's trying to make up for something, and to align our consciousness, our presence, our choices with the good that's already there. Lots of Ernest Holmes today. This is from the Science of Mind textbook. The spirit cannot be or become antagonistic toward us. It is always flowing into us and ever expressing itself through us. This self-expression of God is also the self-expression of man, for the two are one. The I am is both individual and universal. All individuality merges into universality. It's that old thing about there is no second power against you. The question is, okay, so this idea of being in self-will, in your conditioned will, where you're trying to, force it. Does everybody know what that feels like for them? You're right. And then how many of y'all, when you feel that, you go, okay, I'm not going the right direction the first time?
How about the second time?
Second time?
I'll raise my hand on second. Yeah.
I think y'all should be up here and I should be sitting out there because I'm like, this is not a wall. It's not a wall. Right? So the question is, how do I access the part of myself that is like, okay, which way is the river flowing? And why am I drowning here? And the answer to that, according to Ernest Holmes, is that we give in to the present moment. Let me read you this quote. We shall often need to know that the truth we announce is superior to the condition we are to change. In other words, if we are speaking from the standpoint of the Spirit, then there can be no opposition to it. It is only when we let go of all human will and recognize the pure essence of the spiritual principle incarnated in us that we can get this done. The only way that I know to get back to center and remember that I am that I am, that there is no thy will and my will, that there is just this seamless one and I can trust it, is to sit still and breathe. And that is rarely my first response. I'm a really, I've told you all before, I'm up here. You teach best what you most need to learn. Because I have to be reminded over and over. And every time I remind you, I remind me. And so, like many, many other challenges we face, the beginning of a solution, the beginning of alignment, which brings peace, not fighting what is, not fighting what is, begins with breathing. It begins with just coming to this moment where we are. Not bringing in the conditioned thinking from the past, not projecting based on that conditioned thinking into the future, but just simply which way is the river flowing? And so I think when we can get into that present moment, to this present moment, and be living or acting or in touch with our highest self, that is the moment when the division between thy will and my will dissolves, and we're aligned. Trying to think if there's anything else I feel like I need to say. No, there's really not. I do want to, before we go into prayer, I want to read you a couple of these quotes I got as I was sitting writing this talk, and I'm like, well, how do I convey the river? How do I convey the river? I was like, maybe a river quote. And so I looked up a lot of river quotes, and some of them were so beautiful, I feel compelled to share them with you. Because the thing is, they capture so beautifully and so essentially what I've been dancing with and around for 20 or 25 minutes. So I'm going to leave you with these three quotes, and then we'll go into prayer. There are so many people who are arguing or fighting over issues which don't have much relevance. We must all realize it's not worth it. It's like being in the whirlpools, which are always present behind a little rock near a river. We seem to be living in these little whirlpools and forget that there's a whole river. That's by Kalpana Chawla. This is Rudolfo Anaya. I had been afraid of the awful presence of the river, which was the soul of the river. But through her I learned that my spirit shared in the spirit of all things. And this last one is R.M. Rilke. May what I do flow from me like a river, no forcing and no holding back, the way it is with children. Let's pray. So I consciously and with great intention release in this moment any old idea that there could ever be a power that would ever work against me. I know that the manifest universe, this universe that we live in, is here for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to express itself, to have an experience of its infinite divine self as infinite life. Of course, it can't be against me. It is me. And I know that if this is true for me, and it is, then this is true for everyone in this room, and this is true, in fact, for all life everywhere. There is one life, that life is God's life, and it is living itself in, as, and through all of us. And despite what it feels like, and despite what it seems like, and despite the forgetting and the separation that we experience in our minds, that life is good. It is our life, right here, right now, and in every moment. And we can distrust it, and we can fight it. Or we can simply surrender to this beautiful, flowing river of life. And make our journeys a little bit lighter. And so what I affirm is that everyone in this room remembers when it most counts, That, oh, this feels like struggle. This feels like paddling upriver. Let me just breathe. And in that moment, in that breathing, at the bottom of the breath, we remember it is God, it is good, and it is love. So for all that has been, we say thank you. For the freedom and learning of new choices in new moments, we say thank you. And for all the joyful, purposeful possibility this freedom creates, we say thank you. I call it good and very, very, very good. And so it is.